the first generation of any innovation is usually not as good as the second and the third. And what you've been tasting and what we were living through is the first generation. So now we're seeing the second. The first generation was not as good, as cheap, as convenient, so and as sustainable. So all the reasons to make it as an economy were not fulfilled.
Hi folks, James here, and welcome to the Spiro Circle. I speak a lot about cybersecurity and defense tech, and I really love those aspects of Startup Nation. But there's an area of Israeli high tech that I don't talk about much, and that's food tech. I love food tech. I love tech, and I love food. So why wouldn't I? And the things that I know about it, I find it to be a really promising industry. If it's good for animal welfare, if it's good for the environment, and if it's good for health, then that's good for everyone, right? Well, I think I speak for everyone when I say that the food tech industry never quite kicked off the way that we thought it would. Its critics were kind of correct in that the food was never as healthy as they said, the price never went as low as it could to compete with meat products, and it's kind of trailed away. I find that to be really disappointing because I was an optimist when it came to things like this. But admittedly, I was someone that looked at all these products and thought, okay, I'll focus on those in a couple of years when they get a bit better. Turns out too many people did the same thing. I spoke to Ilanit Kabessa Cohen about this. She's the former head of innovation at Osem-Nestlé. Now, that's one of the biggest food manufacturers here in Israel. And today, she's a startup mentor and entrepreneur in the food tech space. So she's worked at the corporate level, she's worked at the startup level, and she's seen every aspect of what makes food tech a success or a failure. Now, I'm not saying it's a failure, but I am saying that it's been quite challenging to overcome some of the hurdles. These things take decades, not years, she told me. So we spoke about some of the history of food tech, Israel's unique position with its historic and traditional dietary requirements among the Jewish people. And then we spoke about how investors and corporates and consumers can all rally behind the next generation of food tech, which is set to be a bit calmer and a bit more consistent. We then also branched out from traditional alternative proteins and different meats to things like personalized nutrition and different ingredients and different drugs that can be helped in our foods that might kind of start blurring these lines between food tech and biotech and health and diet. So it was very interesting. Anyway, I hope you enjoy. Ilanit, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, James. Thank you for this invitation.
I'm very excited because we're about to speak today and discuss two of my favorite things, right? So I read and write and report on tech, but also I love to eat the food at meal times in between the things that I'm doing in my day. So food and tech are two of my favorite things. So I'm very happy to speak to you about all of these things. But you've had a bit of an interesting journey in that it's gone from the large multi-corporate kind of positions there globally, but then also on the smaller startup scale itself and really diving deep into there. So just to give some context for the listeners or viewers, why don't you please give a brief outline into some of your career journey steps and how we came to talking today, please?
That's a very good question, and I'm going to try to squeeze 25 years of experience in a couple of minutes. Largely, I would say that I've spent my whole career in trying to understand one simple question: What does it take to bring innovation to the market globally? And I've been trying. It sounds simple. It's not that simple because it's a system challenge. And I've been trying to understand by myself, by my own experience, what does it mean for each part of this journey? What it takes for each part of this journey, and how it impacts on the journey of innovation of an idea to the market. I was the head of innovation in Osem-Nestlé for 7.5 years. I was the first one to be appointed to this role, one of the first globally. And the interesting part was that when I was offered this position, it was a test, it was a pilot. Gezi Kaplan, which was the CEO, the well-known and famous CEO of Osem-Nestlé at the time, he proposed me this position, and he said, "We don't know exactly what does it mean." And I jumped to that because I like when you don't know, when you don't know things. But it gave me the opportunity really to build the knowledge of what does it mean to build innovation division within a company. So I did that for 7.5 years, moved also for the global corporate position with the global corporate innovation team, and then decided to move out. Then I've been offered the position of, again, building an innovation division, but now on multinational level in Singapore for Dole, which is the largest banana and pineapple grower. I got the special visa for innovation experts by the Singapore government and then moved there. This is where I, again, built an internal innovation division, but also started to build corporate venturing arm targeting the global food and agri-tech ecosystem, trying to look for solutions for the many rising problems and challenges in the banana industry. Did another role in Novozymes as a venture partner, and then decided to stop with working on the multinational side and open my own company together with Uri. Uri is my business partner. He comes from the venture capital industry, and we're very complementary in skills. And we've been working together since. And URIKA is advising multinationals on growth and technology-based growth, how to build innovation, how to build growth. And we've got really a pretty nice list of corporates as clients, but Dole and Novozymes, which were my employees and became my client, and then CSM Ingredients, Schmidt and Clemens, Mikorot, Bazan, and others. Now, taking a little bit of an analysis on this journey, I would say that I have seen the ecosystem or the system of innovation almost from every angle, from the internal corporate, from the venturing side, including working and advising to venture capitals and investment banks and so on. Looking at working with startups globally, the Israeli ecosystem is very strong in this topic, but we've been we're an Israeli consulting industry, but we're working globally. Therefore, we have been working with startups globally, and I've been an entrepreneur by myself my whole life, my whole career, also working within corporates, which means that today I have a kind of a map of drivers, interactions, what are the door blockers, where are the opportunities, how the ecosystem is moving. And this has become a really strong assets that has been accumulated through years.
Wow, it's amazing. It's thank you for the overview, by the way. I couldn't have done it better myself, which is why I wanted to give you the opportunity to really give us all of the highlights. And it's a real testament to the idea of working among loads of different branches and seeing how different areas work and all come together. And specifically when it comes to Israel and its position in food tech, right? Because food tech can sometimes get a bit of a rough reputation, a bit of a rough ride among some of its skeptics. And then Israel has a bunch of tech ecosystems and, it's startup nation, but food tech isn't necessarily the biggest one that it's known for, because there are defense tech and cyber tech and fintech. What are some of the things that you've noticed in your journey, in your experience, in bridging the lean founder, move fast, break things attitude with some of those, as you said, those larger corporations that tend to maybe move a bit slowly, maybe a bit more set in their ways, like, because you've got a bit of a holistic view on the whole thing. So how do these two aspects of, let's say, business and innovation, how do they come together?
That's a very difficult question. I would say that, well, first, yes, the FoodTech ecosystem in Israel is very strong. It's a powerhouse on a global level, but it's still very tiny. Also, on a global scale, it is very tiny, and it is, I would say, thanks to many different reasons, Israel became a very strong in this area. If you want, we will take that in another question. On the what it takes to bring startups, corporates, investors together and make it a success in this specific ecosystem. I think we are still. This is still one of the biggest challenges we're on the way to solve, but not there yet. On the investor side, the food ecosystem globally, the total amount of funding is roughly 16 billion this year. It was flat the last year, so it's not big. It's very tiny. And in the way the venture, there is a kind of an accumulated understanding that the venturing model, the classic VC, is not adopted to the food world, which means that we're now seeing maybe the rising of new models. The reasons are food is complex. Developing a new food ingredient, for example, is complex. It's a biotech world or a chemistry world. It takes time. You cannot reach to massive scale in 10 years. You need capex to manufacture, so you need plants. There's a cost to that. So there's much behind why the classic software venturing model is not, it needs some kind of adaptation. I think that by itself, this understanding is a good point because it took some time to reach there. And what I see now is a change in the model to include also tools like debt finance, SPVs, the involvement of other types of investors. So I think it's going in the right directions.
There's also the barrier of the consumer, right? Because for a lot of time, I mean, food tech, and we'll get into some of the things you mentioned, because you mentioned on some really interesting biotech, and there's a whole new era of food tech that I think isn't in the forefront of forefront of people's minds. But when people think of food tech, they think of Beyond Meat, or they think of alternative proteins, and they think of these lab-grown, 3D printed alternative food products. And that can be quite a challenging hurdle to overcome on the consumer level, right? Because you've got to identify this group of people who maybe don't want to eat meat, but don't want to go plant-based, but want to have an alternative. But so what's it like in the industry to overcome some of those challenges? And then we'll get into why Israel specifically might be a good petri dish for this kind of experimentation.
Right. So I do think we're getting there. You're right. I mean, but we're getting there. I don't think we have cracked it yet as an industry on an industry level. But we're getting there, and it's clear that if you go through the value chain, so we got more raw materials and now technologies and ingredients, and now we're getting to the stage where those ingredients, whether the most advanced that have been produced, for example, by precision fermentation, take, for example, the dairy without a cow, the egg without a chicken, and the cocoa without a plant, and so on. So there is a new set of tools for the industry to work with, but we don't know yet how the consumer react. And I would say that we also don't know yet how to package that in a format, in a proposition, in a product that would appeal to consumers. One of the reasons that we have been encountered with that challenge is exactly the topic of food culture. And you mentioned before that you like to cook, you like food, and you're baking bread. And this is something that, just immediately clicked to my mind, because food is something that almost everyone, not almost, all of us are, consuming food. And part of what many of us also relate to food emotionally. It's part of our culture. It's part of things that we're doing with hands. There's really deep emotional connection. There's history. We're not there yet with connecting the heritage of food, the culture of food, with the new technologies, or with the advanced technologies of the future. We'll get there. This is the last mileage for me, from understanding how ideas is moving across the funnel, or the supply chain, or the value chain. We're there yet now.
It's an incredibly delicate line of balancing, business, science, innovation with exactly the things you mentioned: family, tradition, heritage, culture, and the blending of that. And I kind of want to bring that's a good segment into why Israel, right? And why Israel came as a kind of surprise location for some of these food tech innovations. And for those who may not be familiar, there's a whole neighborhood in Israel called Rehovot. It does artificial meats and proteins and milks, and it's really, It is quite a pioneer in the space. There's, of course, Tival and Osem, some of the brands you mentioned and worked with and managed before, that have kind of been doing, kind of kosher before it was cool, in terms of these free from foods, right? These meat-free alternative nuggets or meatballs or whatever. And that comes from, as you mentioned, a very ingrained, Judaic value, right, of the dietary laws. We're recording this right now. We mentioned breaking bread. Ironically, I'm not eating bread this week because of one of those laws during Passover. So take me back to some of the culture here that's being fostered in Israel that kind of jump-started the food tech industry here before places like Beyond Meat or any, Impossible or any other thing.
Well, you're totally right that the local culture, before we move to the science and the entrepreneurship level and so on, the local culture by itself already had an advanced type of food compared to other places. The plant-based and Tivol, which was one of the first companies globally to invent this segment that is called plant-based, by Schnitzel Tivol. And the same for gluten-free. Osem is, just as example, Osem has been producing gluten-free lachmit, the crackers, for the military for over 50 years. So the topic of gluten-free has been very important to the food culture. Then there was the food revolution in the 90s with Mediterranean cooking and olive oil and the freshness of the freshness of fruits, the freshness of vegetables, and since then the wonderful, amazing creativity of the Israeli contemporary cuisine. So this is just, one topic of one parameter, one of a few parameters which made Israel a ground ripe for global leadership. Then comes, the classic parameters, I would say, for every ecosystem, which we are known in Israel in making such. There's the science, the Hebrew University, Tel Aviv University, the Weizmann Institute, the Technion, and so on, with lots of patents and experiences and knowledge and deep scientific knowledge in biotech, in pharma, in food tech, in agriculture. And so this was the roots of those innovations. And then comes another thing, which is, again, cultural. The ability to take, for example, important inventions in stem cells in biotech, and then bring it into a new domain, which is foods, that requires a certain leap, a certain mental leap, which goes beyond the classic analogical or engineering way of thinking. That is something that is naturally Israeli, the ability to improvise because of the resource scarcity. So moving from one domain to another. Then there is, of course, the entrepreneurs, which are amazing in every category. That this is a known trait of the Israeli entrepreneurs, and I've been working and am working with entrepreneurs globally. And there are differences between Israeli entrepreneurs, American entrepreneurs, Singaporean entrepreneurs, European entrepreneurs. There's a difference. And the strength of the Israeli entrepreneur is definitely its resilience, and also its ability to connect and to understand. It's a global ambitious, but also this understanding that success is something that has been made with partners, with local partners, with external partners, with corporate partners. That it cannot be done by itself. You need other people to work with. And the easy way of Israelis to communicate with each other is also present in the way that they are communicating with other partners. And I think the last point that I can add is it's the Israel Innovation Authority support. By prioritizing the FoodTech world years back, prioritizing this industry as part of the industries that needs to be leveraged, that there is a market failure, that you need to put money in order to create a new industry. I want to mention here the work of an amazing economist. That the name is Dr. Mariana Mazzucati. And she's been researching the role of governments in making the innovation economy in different places in the world. And she's been noted how the excellence of the specific way that the Israel Innovation Authority, and at the time was the Chief Scientist's Office, in promoting and creating innovation by sharing the risk. This approach of sharing the risk is not very common in other places, doesn't exist in the US, it hardly exists in Europe, now more than in other places. Singapore tried to copy that in some way. So by taking everything, the talent, the culture, the capital, the science, this improvisation, everything, this is what is set, and the ecosystem working together, this is what has set Israel to become really a global center for food technologies.
I couldn't have put it better myself, and I couldn't even. There are so many different ways that I can branch off and take this conversation based on what you've said, because you really touched on the full menu, if you pardon the pun, of all of the things, dare I say, ingredients that make it such a great area for food tech. Because you're right, you've got the entrepreneurial spirit that Israel contains, you've got the support from places like the Innovation Authority, you've got the kashrut, the kosher dietary rituals and traditions that are in some ways, as you mentioned, doing gluten-free things for 50 years, way before it was known
Right.
way before it was kind of industry known that these foods were being produced. So there are many different ways I can take this conversation, but I do want to kind of push back a bit, and I want to identify maybe some of the pitfalls that have come along the way, because food tech, for years I was eating artificial burgers here that were developed here in Israel, or fish and steak and all these different foods. And I got really optimistic about it, because in my mind, if something's good for animal safety, if something is cheaper and healthier, then that's a win-win-win. That we kind of don't need meat. And I'm the number one meat eater. I love meat. I'm a big meat eater. It takes a lot to get me there to think something like that, and yet I did. But it never quite got there. Am I right in that we never quite got to the food tech revolution that at least I was expecting maybe 4 or 5 years ago? So what are some of the ways that the industry has fallen short in crossing that finish line?
Well, I think you're totally right in the way you describe the disappointment of both consumers, disappointment of both investors, and in generally whoever was dreaming of this revolution. But I think what I see is, from my point of view, there's a market correction, and it's not just the known market correction in terms of valuation and so on. That's for sure. But there's beyond that. There's a market correction first from the product itself. The first generation of any innovation is usually not as good as the second and the third. And what you've been tasting and what we were living through is the first generation. So now we're seeing the second. The first generation was not as good, as cheap, as convenient, so and as sustainable. So all the reasons to make it as an economy were not fulfilled. But now we see many more good solutions which are tastier, which are healthier. There's a question of also here about processing, how much processing a food ingredient is, how good it is, and so on. And there is the whole ecosystem around it, which is supporting and moving an idea forward. But what we see now from a market correction, we see new solutions, and we see companies which are getting more mature and on the early commercialization of the most craziest ideas that were before. I mentioned dairy without protein dairy without a cow, and we have seen in the past few months in Israel the commercialization of free milk by God Dairies and Imagine Dairy by Strauss and Cow Free, and the fact that those companies have managed to take an idea from a lab all the way through commercialization in a very difficult biotech industry and launch it. There may be changes, maybe I hope it will be successful, but if it's not, there's way, going back to the point of consumer acceptance. But we're there yet. We're on the commercialization phase. This is a global achievement. This is amazing. On another topic is a similar topic. There's a lot of disappointment from cultured meat as an industry. There's huge dreams about making a steak in a lab, burgers in a lab, and so on. It's true, it takes time, and it takes time more than expected. The yields are not there. The prices are not there. But when you're looking at the same technologies or the same knowledge that has brought this idea to the lab, now see the same technology applied to growing cocoa cells and coffee cells, and in a much greater pace. So we're gonna see. I'm gonna mention just two companies in this area. There's Kokomodo, which is growing plant-based cocos without the plant. Then there's Celeste Bio, which is growing the cocoa fat, again in bioreactors from cells. And both of them are gonna be earlier, definitely compared to what we're thinking now about cultured products. So they're going to be in 2 years, more or less. Both of them are going to be in the market, and hopefully with a reasonable economical unit economy. Not yet, but it's going to improve.
And are those people who have already claimed to have made up their minds about this kind of aspect of food tech? Because I was one of those people, right? I saw the potential. I was very excited by it. And I had the burger or the steak, as you mentioned. And I remember thinking, this is going to be great in a couple of years. And the market will work itself out where it's the same price or cheaper and the quality is indistinguishable, et cetera, et cetera. There are people that have fallen off the bandwagon along the way. Are those people expected to come back, or how is that gonna? What's the marketing gonna be for the people who may be, as I mentioned earlier, kind of already skeptical and have their minds already made up? Is that a job of the investors or the companies or the marketing or the parents? What's that funnel?
I think it's going to take it takes all the it takes a village it takes a village to build something. And I think we're going to see, so the previous generation of investors, most of them are not there, but there's few who are very strong and will continue to invest definitely in the most important companies who manage to survive this crisis. But we also see new types of models and new type of investors, and we see also the industry how it is changing. For example, let's take the what GLP-1 is doing for the food industry. So this massive new world of weight management and weight injections is actually impacting on the way people are consuming the foods. So on a massive scale, it means that the industry is moving from volume or selling lots of foods, lots of many cases also empty calories, to high nutritious, nutrient dense food. So value. Value means that we need a new set of tools, meaning a new set of ingredients where they have high nutrition embedded in them. This mostly cannot be done with natural ingredient as is, with the extraction of natural ingredients as is, but it can be done by using different types of computerized tools like protein design systems to design new ingredients which have higher nutritional value. So there is a new space which is being opened now for new type of ingredients. And again, there is the challenge, of course, at the end of the consumer, but as I mentioned,
but the market's changing and it's adapting, and that's what I wanted to get into, because we've touched on it a few times, and I want to kind of focus on it more, because as I said at the start, people think food tech, they think of that artificial burger, they think of the steak, they think of the kind of consumer level, kind of almost gimmicks, right? Oh, try this egg. There's no egg. But there is a lot more to food tech than just these alternative dishes. It's what you said, right? It's the GLP-1 drugs, it's the functional foods, it's personalized nutrition is a big one as well. The things that I may need in my diet is different from what you may need in your diet, or anyone in their diet. And that's a whole other wave of food tech that I don't think is in the forefront of so many people's minds. It's the way that we can use the tech and innovation to really personalize and tailor in the same way that people are doing that with medicines, people are doing that with foods, or can do it with foods. At what point does that start to blur? And at what point does it all start coming together, this biotech, food, medicine space?
Right.
How's that looking? It's because it can be a bit. No, people don't want to be eating space food, but they also this is like a real pioneering thing we can be on.
Right. But first, before we get to the consumers, there is, I think, maybe a mistake that we were doing at the beginning of the food tech industry is thinking immediately how it's going to look from a consumer's point of view, without taking the time to understand that it's going to take years till it get there, and we still have an industry to educate. Now, the most important part today in making this revolution is actually ingredients manufacturers. Those have the specific segment in the value chain. Those are the most innovative parts in the value chain. And those are the companies that are creating, building, implementing new ingredients, and they sell to companies which sell to consumers. So we still have
the B2B side of things, and not consumer facing at all. It's kind of the behind the scenes, right?
Exactly. So there's still another link. So those are the most important at the moment, the current link in this change making. When it comes to is food, is health, is it longevity, is it pharma, is it cosmetics, and yes, it is. It is yes and yes and yes and yes and yes.
Wow.
And I think for me it's amazing to see as one topic has been growing, and how we can leverage technology that has been developed by the food industry, adopted maybe from pharma, now going to cosmetics, now going to other areas, that's a change that is happening today. It is not, it is exciting, I think, from a consumer point of view. It is very exciting. From an industry point of view, it is very challenging because it requires a different set of skills in the corporates that corporates are not there yet. So, for example, if a consumer packaged goods is going to work with functional food and functional ingredients, they need to enhance their scientific team, their nutrition team. They need a new type of knowledge, which is not necessarily always there. That's just one impact. And those who own a functional food brand, maybe that can be maybe extended to a hair care product brand. Now there's a question: so where's the shelf? Where do you put them? Now consumers don't really care because they buy at the end, they buy direct to consumer, and which is another challenge that most of the CPG companies are not using this channel. So it is a moment of change, big change in the industry, not just, the technologies, but also the conversion of different types of industry under one set or one major set of new technologies, and the premise of the premise that you could do good to yourself by eating good food, by impacting food from within on your hair, on your skin, on your health and wellness.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing. I definitely think that people are more aware of all of these things than ever before, both for the good and the bad. How are the corporations, the Nestle's, the Unilevers, the Kraft, whoever, how are they responding to this? Because they're seeing change underneath, right? And they're seeing it either on a startup point of view or consumers who are trying to be more healthy or a bit more aware of some of the food, drugs, or diets, whatever, that are around. What are they doing kind of higher up to prepare for some of the changes that we've just highlighted in terms of the integration of science and innovation into the food practices?
Right. Well, first, Nestle is one of the most advanced when it comes to being prepared to this revolution. Nestle bought in 2020 the company that its name is Vital Proteins. Vital Proteins was born only 7 years before that, and they are producing collagen. So the first set of products that they brought to the market was collagen powder collagen for the skin, right? For the skin, for the joints, for the bones. And this collagen powder could be mixed into your coffee, into your beverages, into your food. This was a sign of the revolution coming in. Since then, we see a new type of ingredients that are exactly there. So the collagen that Nestle was, the collagen brand that Nestle was acquiring actually created a new wave of technologies. This happened in parallel to Geltor, which is a startup that is producing collagen by precision fermentation. Other technology companies, startups working with precision fermentation to create collagen, which is not from bones. In Israel, for kosher food, we use collagen from fish bones. In the world, it's mostly collagen from cow's bones or pig bones. So this whole, of course, that's not very ethical. That's not very sustainable. I'm not so sure about this being a clean process and so on. Those can be produced now biologically identical via technologies like precision fermentation. So we start to see a new type of ingredients that are the origin were animals. They are not anymore, and they're moving from food also to other areas.
Wow. That's amazing. And so that's also another consequence of food tech, right? So it's not just people eating healthier, it's not just maybe more personalized, but it's also environmentally better and better for the animals. And that's the thing. That's the thing for me anyway. Like, if food tech, there are so many pillars of food tech that if all of them were achieved, or if even one of them was achieved, it would be such a win in and of itself, whether it's an environmental win or an animal rights win or a health win. There are just so many benefits
Right.
if it can just all cross that finish line.
That's right.
I want to understand now a bit more the future. So we've touched on the history of some of these things and where Israel was and kind of the ecosystem here that allowed it to flourish. We've touched on the present and then some of its successes and some of its pitfalls. Where do we see all of this going forward? We've addressed that it's going to take a couple of years for the market to kind of really catch up with expectation, but then also fill in some of those gaps there. So where do you see it happening in the next, say, 5 to 10 years in terms of bringing all of this together?
I think that from the food tech, for the pure food tech of the previous generation of food tech, what we're going to see is actually companies starting to, to exit in 2 to 3 years. That's my projection. It is recorded. Let's check it when time's due if I was right. I'm confident that there are the good companies that we see now, those that again will survive the crisis, will be absorbed by the industry and will help in creating this revolution that is starting to happen. Took more than expected, but it is starting to happen. This is for the previous generation of the food tech world. The newest generation is, for me, is actually looking 5 to 10 years ahead, is actually looking beyond food and what we call it animal-free technologies. So I've been, for the past 8 years, I've been the head of the food tech, which became animal-free tech track in color startup competition in Tel Aviv University. This competition is sponsored by CPT Capital, which is the family office of Jeremy Kohler, the well-known Jeremy Kohler. And Jeremy Kohler is a highly successful business person, a philanthropist, and also a very, very fond of animal welfare. And he started invested in food tech as for his personal drive to take animal out of the supply chain globally, of the food supply chain. And his family office was one of the first investors in Impossible Food and Remilk and others. I mean, Remilk is actually a winner of Color Startup competition. So now, after the first generation is now becoming more mature, with CPT Capital, we have decided to leverage the knowledge that have been acquired in those technologies, specifically precision fermentation, molecular farming, other type cultured cell-based food, and so on. We've decided to leverage that and to open this to new type of biomaterials and new type of areas. So we mentioned the conversion of food, health, cosmetic, pharma. This is exactly where we are going. And this means a new opportunity, which create new opportunities, actually, in plural. So many new opportunities. We spoke about collagen, which can be produced by precision fermentation and is used for food and cosmetic. But there's also many types of materials, materials for cosmetic, materials for pharma, materials for testing, materials for building, materials for fashion, from keratin and elastin in cosmetic to heparin in pharma, which is anticoagulant, and other types of materials. Those materials today are being produced with very violent action, like taking pig's intestine and sharks and blood and horseshoe blood and different parts of animals, and it is highly highly pricey. Costs of such products, such ingredients could rise to $15,000 and even more. Let me share this anecdote in a second. And it is not sustainable in many cases. It's untrustable when it comes to supply chain. It sources in a way that we don't know. We don't have the understanding how it is sources, how it is produced, is it secured, and so on. An
Wow.
interesting anecdote is in the beauty area. One of the biggest trend these days in regenerative cosmetics, which is a new term, is actually the use of salmon sperm, injecting salmon sperm in the face, in the skin, because it is declared that it is helping the cells rejuvenate.
I'm not sure I believe that one. That
You don't believe, but the word believe, and an injection of 2 ml, more or less, costs $1,000 in New York, in Dubai, and in various places. Now, if I do the calculation for 1 liter, it is $500,000. $500,000 for a liter for salmon sperms. And yes, it is questionable when it comes to sourcing, supply chain, how the traces of DNA, how secure it is, how safety it is, and so on. So, but this is where the opportunity is. Producing such materials in a much more trusted way, much more economical way, and so on.
I definitely don't have anything in my notes to counter that point that you've just that you've just mentioned. And didn't prepare for that one, unfortunately. But I'll take your word for it. Ilanit, thank you. I have one last question for you, I'm afraid. I've got to keep you that much bit longer. What is the best way for people to get in touch, keep up to date, and see what you folks are up to? And do you have anything exciting coming up that you want to share today?
Well, sure. The easiest way is just to approach me via LinkedIn. You just send me a message. I will get back to you. I also publish there, every important activity that I'm involved in these days. And there's two actually interesting opportunities that I can share, and invite people to join us. The first is the animal-free tech track in color competition is just open, and we're looking for exciting ideas, exciting technologies, and founders to join this competition. And in the past years, this has become the most prestigious competition in the pre-seed stage. Winners are getting $100,000 of prize, sponsored by CPT Capital. And as I mentioned, we're looking for technologies in the area of cosmetics and pharma and nutrition and food and so on, but it has to be animal free, so no animal involved. From testing materials to biomaterials, testing systems, everything. There's information in color competition website. The second opportunity that we can share is that we as URIKA partners, we are acting as the open innovation arm for CSM Ingredients, Lecture Group, a wonderful company for food ingredients. And we are now in the third year of launching a Generate program for startups. This is a partnership program for startups. This is not another incubator, accelerator, demo day. This is a specific strategic partnership program designed for 12 to 18 months for 3 companies And we have just launched a call for proposal with specific areas like sugar reduction, proteins, and nutrition solutions, different areas. Again, you can see that in my LinkedIn and in the Nexture group. This is a program that was designed specifically for startups, with startups in mind, to help them get to the market, accelerate their R&D efforts, and get commercial opportunities. So
Wonderful. That sounds super exciting, and I'll make sure if you provide me with the links, I'll make sure to put everything down below and on the screen so people can very easily follow up with that if they wish to. Thank you so much for your time today. It was so interesting. I learned so much, and what can I say? You've made me very hungry. So I'm looking forward to breaking some bread. Thank you very much, Ilanit. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much.